Economic Development, also known as GO-Biz. My name is Jesse Torres. I'm the new Deputy Director, Small Business Advocate for the GO-Biz office. Particularly excited to be on this webinar today with you as someone who's worked with small business owners for the past several years. I know that defining employees, classifying them is a particular concern for many business owners, and so I'm glad that we have some experts on hand who can help clarify what you need to know as a business owner when it comes to your employees. Your presenters today will be Jason Powers, Sacramento Area Audit Office Hearing Specialist for the Employment Development Department, who will be presenting with his colleague Ling Wu, Employment Tax Consultant for the Employment Development Department. Jason currently represents the department at benefit and tax hearings, and Ling conducts educational and outreach events in the greater Sacramento area. But before I turn this webinar over to them to get started, let's have Janelle Green, our GO-Biz Small Business Specialist, join us, and she'll introduce you to some of the features of the GoToWebinar, the platform we're using today. Janelle?
Thank you, Jesse. At the far right of your screen, you should see a vertical toolbar. This toolbar will provide you with access to audio and visual for the presentation. If you experience any technical audio issues during the presentation, please click on Help at the top of the toolbar and then select Sound Check. This will allow you to check your audio configuration. Please note that participant lines will remain muted during the entire presentation. If you have a question during the webinar, please submit it during the presentation via the questions or chat box. This box is located in the middle of the toolbar. GO-Biz staff will monitor this box and will respond during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. The blue icon with a picture of a yellow hand on the far left side of the toolbar allows you to raise your hand to ask questions. Since we will respond to questions during the Q&A session, this feature will not be used. The blue icon with a white box on the far left side of the toolbar allows you to view the presentation in full screen mode. In addition, I'd like to inform everybody that the recording for this audio and the slides will be available on the GO-Biz website. As soon as we upload the recording, we will send an email out to all registered participants. Now I will turn the presentation over to our presenters today. Jason and Ling, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Employee or Independent Contractor webinar offered by the State of California's Employment Development Department, EDD. We'll explain the process of classifying workers as either employees or independent contractors. During this webinar, we'll describe the differences between employees and independent contractors to address the importance of properly classifying workers. We also discuss the different classifications of workers as defined by state law. Lastly, we'll identify tools and resources available to help properly classify workers. Please note that this presentation is to provide information only. It is not designed to make employment status determinations for particular situations. One of the biggest tax challenges for companies is determining whether workers are employees or independent contractors. Depending on whether the workers are employees or independent contractors, there are relevant forms to complete for reporting and depositing purposes. Wages paid to employees are subject to payroll taxes. Earnings of independent contractors are not. If you hire employees to perform services for your business, you are responsible for reporting wages paid to your employees, as well as paying and remitting the taxes and contributions due from those wages. These taxes are employment insurance, otherwise known as UI, employment training tax, otherwise known as ETT, state disability insurance, otherwise known as SDI, and personal income tax, otherwise known as PIT. The employer is only responsible for paying the UI and ETT. The employer withholds SDI and the PIT from the worker's wages and later remits them to the EDD. Independent contractors are subject to different reporting requirements. They will generally receive a Form 1099 miscellaneous. They will pay $600 or more for services during the calendar year. and they will be responsible for paying their own taxes. Also, independent contractors are not entitled to benefits designed exclusively for employees. Making correct decisions will help you avoid the consequences associated with misclassifying a worker. The misclassification of workers refers to situations where a business has classified a worker as an independent contractor, but the worker is actually a common law or statutory employee. The misclassification may be discovered through a variety of sources. Misclassified workers may file claims for unemployment insurance or state disability insurance. This claim may trigger investigation and possibly tax audit. If a misclassified worker is injured on the job, the employee may apply for workers' compensation benefits. The company may be subject to penalties for not having covered its employees with workers' compensation insurance. Owners of competing firms may advise EDD that you are not correctly classifying your workers. The practice of treating employees as independent contractors and not paying payroll taxes or workers' compensation insurance premiums unfairly allows those companies to undercut the prices and goods or services of their competitors who are reporting wages correctly, thereby putting those competing firms at a financial disadvantage. An investigation or audit initiated from any of these leads may result in a tax assessment. The employer will be responsible for all employment taxes, including those taxes that should have been withheld from their employees' wages. The assessment may include penalties and interest. In some situations, employers can consequently lose their local and state licenses. This example will show how worker misclassification will result in higher state payroll taxes. To keep things simple, we use one worker who earned $20,000 for the year 2015. Notice that employer A, who correctly classified the worker as an employee, is responsible only for the employer's share of taxes, which are UI and ETT on the first $7,000 in wages paid to each employee per calendar year. In this example, employer A pays $238 in UI and $7 in ETT, for a total of $245. Employer B, who misclassified the worker as an independent contractor, must not only pay the UI of $238 and ETT of $7, but also must pay the employee's share of taxes, which are SDI of $180 and the PIT of $1,200. These taxes should have been withheld from the workers paid by the employer, but they were not. Therefore, employer B must pay $1,625 in state payroll taxes, which is $1,380 more than the amount paid by employer A. Employer B's liability will be higher if penalty and interest were also assessed. In order to keep this example simple, we have used only one worker with relatively low annual earnings. A typical audit might involve several workers with higher earnings than used in our example. Also, the typical audit will cover a 3-year period, as opposed to the 1 year which we have shown. Employers typically will not use 6% for PIT unless it's a supplemental payment. PIT should be calculated based on the employee's withholding schedule. Let's say that you are in business and doing well, so well that you decide to hire some workers. Anytime you hire somebody to perform services for your business, that individual is either an employee or independent contractor. There's no other category. When a worker is paid for services, you must determine whether the worker is an employee or independent contractor using the common law test. For those of you not familiar with the term common law, it is law based on common usage, including decisions and opinions of the court. Additionally, there are statutes that determine a worker to be an employee. A statutory employee is an individual who is defined to be performing services as an employee, regardless of the common law rules, and meets the requirements for employment under a particular statute. The California Employment Insurance Code, CUIC, provides that certain employees and certain type of employment are not subject to one or more payroll taxes, which include UI, ETT, SDI, and PIP withholding.
Lynn, just one moment. Do you mind defining again what ETT and PIT or PIT is?
Yes, UI is employment insurance. ETT is employment training tax. SDI stands for state disability insurance, and PIT stands for personal income tax withholding. We'll discuss statutory employment, a specific type of employment not subject to certain payroll taxes, in more detail later. First, we'll explain how the common law is used in determining if a worker is an employee or independent contractor. Take a moment to answer this question. What's the difference between how you as the business owner do your work and how your workers do their work? The answer to the question is that you are your own boss and you provide direction to your workers. In other words, the difference between you, the business owner, and those working for your business is who controls whom. During this part of the presentation, we'll use the words principal or business owner interchangeably to refer to the person or entity which has the power over the business. The primary test for employment is whether the principal has the right to control the worker. An employee is an individual who performs services for you and is subject to your control as to what, when, where, and how the work is to be done. If the principal has the right to control the manner and the means of the workers in performing their services, whether or not that right is exercised, an employer-employee relationship exists. What matters most is whether you have the right to exercise control over the details of how the services are performed, not whether you exercise that right. An independent contractor, on the other hand, is an individual who performs services for you, but you only control the end result of the work, not manner and means of accomplishing the end result. In other words, if you hire an independent contractor, you only control the outcome of the working relationship, not details on how the services are to be performed. As I mentioned earlier, the determination of an employment relationship is built upon the body of law handed down from the court decisions and the common usage. It's called common law, and the EDD makes their decisions based upon it. The right to control, whether or not exercised, is the most important factor in determining whether a worker is an employee or independent contractor. Strong evidence of the right to control is the principal's right to discharge the worker at will and without cost. Now, Jason will explain in more detail some of the common law factors used to determine whether a worker is an employee or independent contractor.
Thank you, Lane. The courts have held that to make employment determinations, various factors regarding the relationship must be considered. These factors are also referred to as secondary factors. In any employee independent contractor determination, all information that provides evidence of the degree of control and the degree of independence must be considered to determine which party, the worker or the business owner, has the right of control. The amount of weight given to these factors must also be considered. The amount of weight or importance each factor carries is an indicator of the right of control. The weight varies depending upon the work situation, industry, or occupation. A determination of whether or not a worker is an employee will depend upon a grouping of factors that are significant in regard to the service being performed, rather than depending on a single controlling factor. Let's take a closer look at the common law factors. The key issue for the common law test is to determine whether the worker or the company has the right to control how the work is done. To gain a better understanding of how the factors are examined and weighted, we will determine the extent of control shown by each factor. We will look at each of the 10 factors as defined by the California Code of Regulations, Title 22, and investment consideration, dealing with profit and loss, as referenced by the California Appellate Courts. First one, distinct trade or occupation. Does the worker have a separately established business? Let's analyze the factor. A readily identifiable way to hold oneself out as an independently established occupation or business would include the name of the person or the person's business name in media advertising, commercial telephone listing, signs or displays on vehicles or premises, or on brochures. Some of the questions to be answered are, does the individual have a separately established business? Does he or she make his or her business available to the general public? Does he or she provide services for more than one firm at a time? And does he or she have a substantial investment in facilities? Please note that having one's own business does not automatically rule out the possibility that the worker might be subject to control by a business owner in a particular relationship. For example, a licensed psychologist has her own private practice where she schedules her patients' appointments, determines how much to charge, and provides equipment and supplies for her practice. Another licensed psychologist works for a large organization, such as a hospital, which secures the patients, sets the price, determines the work shifts, sets the pay rates, and provides office space, equipment, and supplies for the psychologist. In this scenario, the psychologist may be an employee of the hospital. Second one, supervision. Does the worker have to follow instructions, or do they have the expertise that enables them to complete the work without direction? In some industries or occupations, it may be the norm for the work to be done under the control of the principal, without direct supervision. In such instances, the lack of supervision will often not carry significant weight. For example, a web designer working for a web design company is not likely to be directly supervised. However, that web designer may still be an employee of the web design company. Skill level. Does the work require a high level of skill? A low skill level is strong evidence of employment, since there is less room to exercise the discretion necessary for independence. A high skill level is important in establishing independence when combined with other factors. For example, people working as laborers, where a high level of skill or knowledge is not important, are likely to be employees, while someone with a high skill or knowledge level has a greater likelihood to be independent. Please note, being highly skilled does not automatically make the individual an independent contractor. Tools in place of work. Who provides these? This factor deals with material things. Does the principal furnish the tools, equipment, materials, and supplies? Does the worker perform the services on the principal's premises? Working on the company's premises and using the company's equipment would imply control, since the owner controls access to the premises and the use of equipment. Thus, the owner would have the right to control the ability of the worker to perform his or her job. Therefore, this factor may be weighed more heavily when making a status determination. On the other hand, it's common in the construction and auto repair industries for workers to provide their own hand tools. In these cases, the same factor will not have as much weight. Sometimes, for practical reasons, it's necessary for the work to be performed on the principal's premises. For example, an outside accountant may come to the place of business to gather data because books and records are maintained on the premises. In this case, little weight would be given or placed on this fact. In other words, if there is a compelling reason for the work to be done on the principal's premises, which does not relate to control, the location should not come into play in deciding which way the factor leans. Length of time. Is the work an isolated event or continuous in nature? To analyze this factor, we need to ask the following question. Are the services provided on a continuous or repetitive basis, or are they provided for specific limited duration projects? Please note that an employee may perform services on a less than full-time permanent basis. The law does not exclude services from employment that are commonly referred to as day labor, part-time help, or casual labor. Part-time or seasonal workers may be considered to be working on a continuous basis. The time of performing the service may result in strong evidence of employment if the performance occurs during regular intervals at regular times. Method of payment. Is the worker paid by the hour, piece, or by the job? Expanding on this factor, time or piece rate payments are often signs of control by the business. Why? Because the principal is concerned about the time the worker will take to do the job. Each hour of work costs the principal money. Independent contractors agree to do a job and bill for the service performed. Payments to independent contractors for labor or service are made upon the completion of the project or completion of the performance of specific portions of the project. Therefore, the principal is not concerned with how many hours a day an independent contractor to do the job, as long as the job is completed within the time agreed upon in the contract. The cost for the job will be the same to the owner regardless of the time spent by the worker. Exceptions exist in certain industries or occupations where it is typical for bona fide independent contractors to bill by the hour, such as attorneys. In analyzing this factor, we also need to consider the following. Who sets the pay rate? Whether the pay rates are negotiated or not, and who determines the frequency of payments. Regular part of business. Is work a regular part or integral to the principal's business? This factor asks whether the business can exist without certain services being performed. Does the business depend on the services performed by the worker? Integration of the worker's services into the principal's business operation generally shows that the worker is subject to direction and control by the principal. For example, if the principal is in the business of selling insurance and the services are performed by a plumber fixing pipes in the insurance company's office facilities, it is not evidence that the services of the plumber are performed in the employ of the insurance sales company. Belief of parties. Do the parties believe they are creating the relationship of employer and employee? The existence of a written contract or agreement by itself is not sufficient to determine that a worker is an independent contractor. The actual practice of the parties in a working relationship is more important than the wording of an agreement in determining whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor. When a worker is coerced into signing an agreement as a condition of securing a job, there exists a strong indication of control by the principal. Extent of actual control. To have a full understanding of this factor, we need to ask a series of questions. The first question is, does the principal have the ability to terminate the worker at will without liability or legal repercussions for terminating the contract? The next questions associated with the extent of control are, is the worker required to render these services personally? Does the principal provide training or instructions on how to do the work? Does the principal set the hours of work or the number of hours to be worked? Is the work required to be done in a set order or sequence? Does the principal require oral or written reports from the worker as to how the work was performed? Services benefit the principal. Is the principal in business? And do the services benefit the business or the principal as an individual? This factor forces us to ask whether the services are being performed for the business, or is it being performed personally outside the owner's business? Some people may ask, what type of services would not benefit the owner? Let me clarify this with an example. You are the owner of a furniture store, and you engage the services of an electrician to perform services for your house. The home is not part of your furniture business. The work performed by the electrician is for you, the owner, personally, not for your business. Such services would not imply control by the business. Profit or loss. Can the worker control profits and losses by a means other than increasing or decreasing the number of hours worked? Does the worker have control over the pricing structure and expense incurred related to the work being completed? The California appellate courts have upheld the business ownership characteristic of sustaining a loss as well as earning a profit is a factor to be considered in deciding whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor. This factor discusses whether the worker can make business decisions excuse me. This factor discusses whether the worker can make business decisions which would enable him or her to earn a profit or incur a loss. The investment of the worker's time is not sufficient to show a risk of loss. The worker may have a continuing fixed expenses such as rent or ongoing expenses related to the work performed, such as utilities, equipment, supplies, or payroll. Generally speaking, independent contractors have fixed costs of some kind. For independent contractors, if earnings do not exceed these costs, a loss will occur. Possibility of incurring a loss indicates that the worker is an independent contractor. On the other hand, employees do not incur similar risks. The lack of such investment implies dependence on someone else, like the business owner, to cover the cost of doing business. Now keep in mind the importance or weight given to each factor will vary depending on the specific work situation, industry, or occupation. There may be some factors which lean toward employment and some factors which lean toward independence. All factors must be considered and weighted together to determine which type of relationship exists. As an employer, you need to review all the factors and apply them to your particular situation. Now let's turn our attention to statutory law. As we mentioned earlier, there are specific statutes that determine a worker to be an employee. A worker may be an independent contractor, not an employee under the common law, but may be an employee by statute. For statutory law to be fulfilled, the facts about the worker in question must apply to every word within the law. In other words, all criteria established by a statute must apply for the statute to be applicable. For example, the following individuals are considered employees by law under a specific statute. Corporate officer. Under Section 621A of the COIC, a statutory employee includes any officer of a corporation. Unlicensed construction workers. Under Section 621.5B of the COIC, any individual not holding a valid contractor's license but performing services requiring a contractor's license will be considered an employee of the licensed or unlicensed contractor who has hired such an individual. Certain limited liability company members, or LLC members. Under Section 621F of the COIC, a statutory employee includes any member of an LLC that is treated as a corporation for federal income tax purposes. If the worker is a statutory employee, the worker's wages may be subject to all payroll taxes, including personal income tax withholding. Please refer to the information sheet Statutory Employees, DE 231SE, for further details. The COIC provides that certain employees in specific types of employment are not subject to one or more payroll taxes. In other words, a worker may be an employee under the common law, but wages are not subject to certain payroll taxes. Some common law employee services, which include but are not limited to agricultural laborers, family employees, those in domestic employment, sellers, and licensed real estate agents are circumstances. For a complete list of these exceptions to the information sheet employment, which is 231E. And now Lean will provide you with information on available resources and EDD services for business.
Thank you, Jason. The EDD provides a number of tools and resources to assist employers in making a correct decision as to whether a worker is an employee or independent contractor. Here are a few. California Employers Guide, DE 44, is published to help you understand your rights and responsibilities as an employer, and it's an important resource on the procedures required for compliance with California payroll tax laws. The information sheet, Employment DE 231, provides details on employment status. The EDD has a variety of information sheets which covers specific employment topics, address the employment status in specific industries, and spell out a variety of exemptions, exclusions, and other tax issues. The EDD's information sheet, the D231 series, can be downloaded from the internet. Employment Determination Guide, DE38, provides a worksheet to determine whether a worker is most likely an employee or independent contractor. If after completing the DE38, you're still not sure how to classify your workers, you may request a written determination. Determination of employment work status, DE1870, is used to request a written determination from the EDD on the employment status of a worker. The EDD will issue a written determination based upon the facts presented. If the facts change during the course of a working relationship, the determination is no longer valid, and you will need to contact the EDD for a new determination. The EDD will assume that the information provided is accurate and that no significant details have been omitted. If that is not the case, the determination will not be valid. Forms and publications can be viewed and downloaded from the internet, ordered by telephone, and they are available at our walk-in and self-service offices. You may also contact our Taxpayer Assistance Center at 1-888-745-3886 for assistance. Also, EDD offers state payroll tax seminars at no cost. Some of them are offered in conjunction with other state and federal agencies. The Employee or Independent Contractor Seminar is one of the many seminars available to our customers. If you would like to learn more about this topic, you can sign up for our classroom seminars at the website address listed on the slide, or take the online employment status course at the link provided in the chat room. The EDD's e-Services for Business is a fast, easy, and secure way to manage your payroll tax account, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Employers are encouraged to use e-Services for Business that allows online access to manage their employer accounts through the internet. Additional features include new employers can register for an EDD employer account where they can access account and payment information, file most of the EDD tax returns and reports, make payroll tax deposits, pay past liabilities, or make payment arrangements by credit card or electronic fund transfer. View payment history and account balance. View payroll tax rates. Make updates to your account, including changing your address, and close or inactivate your account. Employers can enroll for e-Services for Business on EDD's website with prompts to guide them through the enrollment process. The EDD has also created tutorials so employers, agents, and representatives can become familiar with e-Services for Business. For more information on e-Services for Business, please access the website address listed on the slide or contact our Taxpayer Assistance Center for assistance. This concludes our presentation on employee or independent contractor. On behalf of the EDD, we hope this presentation has provided you with a basic understanding of common misconceptions about independent contractor and about classifying a worker as an employee or independent contractor. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ling, and thank you, Jason. We'll now go ahead and look at the questions that have been submitted. If any of the participants on the line have questions, please feel free to provide them to us via chat through that questions chat box on the toolbar. So the first question I'll ask, let's see. The question is, does it matter whether or not this involves nonprofit board of directors work? So do these definitions apply to nonprofit boards?
Nonprofit organizations are typically still employers. Board of directors may not be subject. In some cases, it depends on whether or not they actually provide a service for the corporation. So you're kind of talking about two different things here. So if you may want to look at, I think there's a information sheet about payments to corporate officers, and it might involve whether or not payments to board of directors are subject. So I don't know about your specific situation, and we don't really address specific situations here, but you may be, if you provide some services to the corporation for operation, then yeah, maybe those payments may be subject.
Thank you. Another one, are there any differences between California and federal government's interpretation of employees versus independent contractors?
Yeah, the California typically, we base most of our laws on IRS, however we're not required to follow the IRS. There's going to be some differences about how we interpret different things. So even though someone is an employee or an independent contractor, the California may actually view it a little differently.
Thank you. Offer one-on-one help sessions?
Well, we can if you're a business owner, we can audit your business in one. But if you can call that, which is 1-888-745-386. We typically have a call. In the course of the business, provide services, and you're paying them for those services, whether or not it's cash or some other way of paying them. Typically, they're subject employees, unless they're 18 or you're the sole owner of the business and you have your dad or your mom, then typically they're going to be subject. We have an information sheet for family employment. It's called the D231 FAM. Or FAM, that should answer most of your questions about family employment.
This other question, and I may need this person to elaborate, is DE231PC payments to corp officers.
That might have been in reference to that other one. That is the information sheet for payments to corporate officers.
Okay. I have independent contractors. Where would I begin to make them become employees?
All right, if you think they're employees and you want to begin reporting them, then you would start by registering an account with the EDD for your business. You can do that online at www.edd.ca.gov, or coming into one of our taxpayer assistance centers or service centers. There's one at if you're in Sacramento, it's on Power Run Road, but again, our website should have all the information for registering an employment account. I hope that's your question.
Okay. Well, how about if you're a business owner and yeah, you have independent contractors that may be employees, you know, what would be the first steps you should take to address those concerns?
Again, have we already decided that they're employees?
Let's assume yes, we've decided.
Yeah, then you want to register an account with the EDD.
So that's the first step you should take.
If once you've paid them more than $100 in a quarter, then yeah, they're employees. Okay. So yeah, you want to make sure that you get online.
If you are unsure about the status, how's the best way to find out for sure?
Well, we mentioned the DE 38, which is the Employment Determination Guide, or there's a longer form, which is the DE 1870. The DE 38, which is a worksheet that you use on your own. And you'll answer those series of questions that are in that DE38. Again, I think if you search for DE38 or any of these DE231 series forms on Google, just type it in, and usually the first thing that pops up is the form itself in a PDF from our website. But the DE38 is that sort of like that self-service worksheet that helps you determine whether or not you should be an employee, he or she should be an employee or an independent contractor. There's a more elaborate one that's used by the department you can send in. It's called the DE1870. It's a determination of employment work status. This will ask you as to whether it should be an employee or an independent contractor.
Next question: if somebody is an independent contractor and possibly getting paid some form of disability, the question is, would I, as a business owner, be responsible? So responsible for paying this disability? If you have a
well, if they're truly an independent contractor, then they're responsible for their own stuff. If they're misclassified as an independent contractor, and we came around and determined that they're an employee, then you would be responsible for whatever taxes should have been paid, be it any unemployment or disability insurance, and that employee training tax and personal income tax. I think that if that's the question you're asking.
Thank you. So this other question is, how do we register to submit quarterly forms online and pay as well? That's through e-business services, correct? Through that,
yeah.
that slide that you showed us.
E-services for business is the best way to do all of that.
Another question: will attending a payroll tax seminar cover employer reporting requirements?
There is, specific seminars for reporting purposes.
Yes, we have several type of seminars. One of them is called the State Basic Payroll Tax Seminar, and another one is offered in partnership with the IRS. It's called the Federal and State Basic Payroll Tax Seminar. And there we also offer a workshop called State Payroll Tax Workshop. That's a hands-on training, a small class, and this class, attendees will learn how to calculate state payroll taxes, how to determine timely due dates for payroll tax deposits, and how to complete all the quarterly returns for E9 and D9Cs.
Thank you. Another question: if you feel that you are an employee but you are not being called that by your employer, how should you proceed? So if you're currently an independent contract, you are an employee but you're being considered an independent contractor by your employer, what would be your first step?
We do have a hotline. Boy, I wish I had the number. Again, the website should have it, or actually the Taxpayer Assistance Center can direct you there also. But there is a hotline. You can let us know either anonymously or with your name that you feel like you're being misclassified. And a lot of times we can go out and do a quick audit or an investigation of the business and find out if that's truly the case.
So who is responsible then to validate the proper classification? So the employee could go to EDD for assistance in that matter?
Yeah.
Okay.
The employer is responsible for properly classifying their workers. There's a number of resources out there available to them, and they should, at least aware that's there. So, but a lot of times they either are misinformed or they have a belief that the worker is an independent contractor, so they'll treat him as such, and that's when we come in and help them make the right decision or determination.
Okay. Another question is, does the business need to file a monthly report if they only have one employee?
If you have any employees and you pay them more than $100 in a quarter, you're required to file to report that worker. And we file on a quarterly basis. So, but for personal income tax purposes, it's a little bit different. You can refer to the DE44, which is our employer's guide, for the frequency in which you need to report personal income tax. But typically, if it's just one person and it's relatively low wages, you could report everything quarterly. But it is, if the personal income tax is actually, I think it mirrors your federal income tax reporting responsibilities.
Thank you. Another question: if my competitors treat their workers as independent contractors, is it okay for me to treat my workers as the same?
No is the short answer. If they're misclassifying those workers, it happens a lot, and that's actually where we get a lot of our audit leads. But just because one business is doing it doesn't make it right for the other businesses to do it. It's where that line comes in. The sort of kind of like a whistleblower line or whatever I just mentioned. Where you can call in and tell the EDD that you're aware of another business that's misclassifying workers and you'd like us to look at it. Especially if there's a number of workers, we'll be more inclined to come out and help set them straight, so to speak.
Great. Another question. So if I hire day laborers or casual laborers for part-time, temporary, probationary, or substitute work, are they employees or independent contractors?
Typically, part-time or temporary workers, or even the casual laborers that like construction people might pick up. They're all employees if you're paying them a wage and it's in the course of the business. So just because they're working on a part-time basis or they're working for one day or just for a short period of time, typically they will still be employees.
Great. This is sort of related, but I just want to make sure we cover it. So if let's see, this question: my wife is a president of a furniture rental company. She's debating whether to hire full-time truck drivers or independent contractors. Who could she talk to about making that decision to just get some helpful information? So this is before she's decided to secure any kind of work from anybody, to see what the appropriate classification would be.
Yeah, you want to talk to your tax guy or your CPA or whoever. There's a lot of professionals out there that get paid a lot of good money to help you make these decisions. When EDD gets involved, we look at the actual working relationship and we take the facts that are presented to us to make our determinations. We can't advise you how to classify your worker or how to make a worker an independent contractor versus an employee. So I would refer to your accountant or whoever you have, or find one that can help you out, that specializes in employment.
Thank you. I'm looking to see if we have any other questions. If you have any more, please, for those on the line, please submit them now. These questions have led to a great discussion. And I think that concludes, unless we get any more that come through. Well, thank you all for your time. We appreciate you submitting these questions. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jesse.
Thanks, Janelle. Well, this concludes our webinar. Thank you, Jason and Ling, and all the participants for joining us today. For those of you on the line, the recording for this audio with the slides will be available on the GO-Biz website. As soon as we upload the recording, we will send out an email to all the registered participants. But again, thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.